Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles.
Chapter 9. So we begin with the final vision, right? So remember, there are oracles and there are visions and we saw dialoguing and so forth. So this is a vision, another one. And again, this is not something that is happening. It's something that will happen. So it's always things that's the difference between like a vision. An oracle could actually be something that is imminent or has already begun or something. But these visions, they are a self-contained thing. And we saw already that there was a reference in one of the other chapters about a change that occurred. So Amos is saying if you do A, B, C, and D, this won't happen because it was only a vision.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the oracle is as a process that is actually in process, and it cannot be reversed. He's just talking about God knows this, and therefore this is going to happen. So, okay. So, Ra'iti et Adonai nitzav al mizbeach, vayomer, hach hakaftor, v'yirashu sipim, uvetza'am berosh kulam, v'acharitam b'cherev eherog, lo yanus lahem nas, v'lo yimalait lahem palit. Right? None of them will escape, and not one of them will survive. But if you look later on, actually, this is the forerunner to a very famous Motown group. I can't remember which one it is, but it's a famous rock and roll song, Nowhere to Run to, Nowhere to Hide.
Mm.
And this is actually Amos invented that, as you will see in a few minutes. Nowhere to run to, nowhere to hide. Did you ever see
Martha and the Vandellas?
There you got it. Bingo. Martha and the Vandellas. Yes, famous rock and rolls. And Amos actually is the first to say that. All right. So I had this vision, and Adonai is standing by the altar. And he's now going to tell him what God said in the vision that he has to do to this temple, okay? And the question is, what temple? And reason would dictate that this is the temple in Beit El. So this vision then is where he is at the time, we don't know. Knowing his chutzpah, he's probably still in Beit El. Even though, remember, the high priest Amatzia told him, get out of here if you want to stay alive, okay? So but as far as we know, he never really left. But this vision, envision something in Beit El, because that's he wouldn't be saying destroy the temple if this were Judah, if this were Jerusalem, because God's not that angry at you, okay? All right, so he's standing by the altar. God is standing by the Mizbeach, by the altar. And so he says, he's talking now about the pillars of the temple. So hacha kaftor, all right, hit the upper part. There's like a bulbous bump on the top of which the roof sits. I mean, you've seen pillars. Think of your Greek pillars, right? And you have these things, some different designs, but they are wider on the top to stabilize the roof that sits on top. So their kaftor is the term itself actually is used elsewhere because the menorah that's described in Shmot has kaftor v'perach, right? The kaftor and the flower. The kaftor is what the calyx, which is like a leafy container that opens up, and then the blossom emerges. Okay, we have on some of the fruit trees we have outside here, there's a kaftor, and then the fruit, when the flower that's going to ultimately morph into a fruit, hopefully, opens up, the kaftor goes like this. But the kaftor itself is rounded, it's sort of bulbous in shape. So the top of the pillar has that bulbous sort of a shape, to sustain the roof above it. So if you hit the kaftor, so it means that Amos has got to climb up on a ladder and get to the top there and hit it. Then the the thresholds, or if you want, door frames, will quake. It's interesting. Yirashu, right? The root is from ra'ash, right? Which means, you've said today, maze ra'ash. What is ra'ash?
Earthquake.
No, but what is it? That's what it means.
Noise. It can mean noise. It could be an earthquake.
Noise, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's noise. Tell me that ra'ash, Po. Not that the place is shaking. It's too noisy. Shut up, All right. So, but it means earthquake because when an earthquake happens, it's the scariest thing. There's always a, right? You've been through earthquakes. I never heard of a quiet earthquake. Anyway, the door frame will start to shake. Then it says uvatza'am barosh kulam. All right, and cause this to end. There was some destroy, make them fall at the beginning, at the head. In other words, you do this, and you get the people who are on at the front of whatever crowd is there. The achritam b'cherev aherog, and I will kill them, the rest of them, those in the back, with a sword. Okay. So they're going to work together to kill these people. So, if this is inside the temple, and again, it's a vision. The first thing is who's inside the temple? Who would be inside the temple?
Wait, God is, because isn't the first phrase, I saw the Lord standing beside the altar? That means God's there.
No, the altar could be the altar outside.
The Kohanim, maybe?
Yeah, Kohanim. Right, the Kohanim would be in.
Right.
But this is a vision, so it doesn't have to be totally realistic. So it means there are people in there too. All right, but we don't know. Okay, it's a vision. So, but the point is, these people, whomever they are, will not be able. There's no escape for them. No being safe. They shall not survive. Not one of them. They're going to all die. Okay, and Amos and God will do that together. Okay. All right. Let me see anything else I need to express. No. Yeah, the interesting thing is, so God's going to kill them with a sword. God has a sword. It's a vision, right? So you can be as imaginative as you wish. So I don't know how Amos envisioned that. What's is it going to be a big sword that just circulates around and cuts people's heads off or something? That really sort of threw me for a loop there, how God uses a sword. So I don't know, unless it's just a metaphor, some kind of bloody death that will take these people's lives.
Up and down.
Or maybe metaphor for the enemies of Israel, no?
Well, no, the enemies of God.
Yeah, but God will send them with swords.
It could be, but there's no mention of enemies.
No, but with an image.
This is specifically.
Yeah, I guess so.
I see what you're saying, right? But the vision itself. Remember, this is a vision.
Yeah, okay.
So it could. I want to be as imaginative as possible.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
Right.
And that's why it's not necessarily you're giving a very rational explanation, Ellie. But this is a vision, so it doesn't have. Allow your imagination to roam.
Okay, so I'll go back to the word kaftor. Kaftor is in Hebrew in Israel today is a button.
Yes, of course.
And I'm trying to match your description of kaftor.
Well, round, a kaftor is round. Yes,
it's round and it has an opening kind of for the things to go in there.
For the thread.
For the thread.
Yeah. Right.
So I just tried to make a comparison.
No, that's understandable. Roundness,
right,
is something that is associated with this.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so that's it. Now, second. Now, this is really more interesting. You want to talk about imagination? Im yachteru v'shaol misham yadai tikachem v'im ya'alu hashamayim misham oridem. If they shall dig down to Sheol, okay, burrow down in the soil deep. From there, my hand will pull them out. And if they try to get up to heaven, from there I will bring them down. And they're so he's got them all here, and then presumably he's going to get rid of them again, right? So what I find interesting, though, is this whole notion. Obviously, this is what I'm saying. It's imaginative, right? I mean, who in their right mind is going to dig down into Sheol, right? The underworld, where people go when they die, and that's where they stay.
Well, that's where the imagination.
Yes, exactly. Yes, it's exactly. But there is a thought, some explanations on this are that there was a sense God does not rule in Sheol.
Right.
Okay, which is sort of a precursor to the Christian concept of a devil, right? The underworld, the dark side, as opposed to the force. Think, Star Wars, the dark side.
Okay.
Yeah. So the point is, a person who tries to burrow and get down below, it's not that they're trying to die; they're trying to get to a place where God can't get them. But what he's saying is, and then, again, this is symbolic. This is a metaphor. Yes, you're gonna dig down, hide under the ground as deep as you can go. I have my own bunker buster. I am a bunker buster. You can get down below. See, almost invented the concept of the bunker buster.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
This one we know works. Anyway.
Yeah.
So okay. So that just a second. And then similarly, try to get up to heaven, right? If you can ascend to heaven, then presumably, I don't know, but that's where God is. Why would somebody go up to heaven, get closer to him?
That doesn't make sense.
Makes no sense at all, right?
Right.
It's a vision. It's a vision.
Okay.
They're using extreme metaphor to express the point. Nobody gets away.
Exactly.
Right. You can run, but you can't hide.
Yeah, nowhere to run to, nowhere to hide. Yeah.
Okay.
Leon, your hand goes up and down.
Well, I was just thinking, it's kind of funny to take somebody who's already dead because he's in Sheol and kill him again.
No, but these guys aren't dead yet. That's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wants to make sure they're really dead.
Right.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah, but never see. God should have just said, "Okay, you dig down. I'll get you down there. Squish, step on them or something like that."
Yeah.
No, I think they're on the way to Sheol. Yachteru probably means they are going to Sheol, right? Would that be true? They're not quite in Sheol. Yachteru.
Yeah. They're trying to get down there, right? They're
try to get down there. Yes.
They're going there to try.
Yeah.
That's how they're trying to escape, right? I mean, again, it's a metaphor for people trying to get underneath something.
I think Steinsaltz says it. Lechabe afilu b'Sheol.
Yeah, exactly. To hide oneself. Exactly. Yes, of course. But that's the nimshal. The mashal is Sheol. But here you get again the next one. Here, look at this one, verse 3. V'im yechavu b'rosh hakarmel misham achapes ulekachtim. V'im yisatru mineged einai bekarka hayam misham matza ve'et hanachash lenashcham.
Bayam.
This is really interesting. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Right? So if they hide on the top of Carmel, why Dafka Carmel? Well, if you're in Yisrael, right, the northern part, that's probably the highest hills you got around.
No.
Mount Har HaCarmel, Hare HaCarmel. Okay, that's a small mountain range of small mountains. We would here probably call them hills, like the Hollywood Hills. But over there, look, Israel's a small country, so they call them mountains. Anyway, so somebody's going to climb up on the top of Mount Har Carmel, right, and hide up there. I'll get them. I'll search for them, and I'll take them. But this is interesting. And if they hide against mineged einai, away from my eyes, bakarka hayam,
The bottom of the sea.
and that probably means the seabed, right? So then, unless it's the beach, but that's not really hiding. It's underwater. So if somebody does that, now the interesting thing is, why doesn't God say, "I'll put on my scuba and get you"? But it doesn't say, "I'll get the nachash to bite you." Who is the nachash?
Right.
Well, it depends. It's not a nachash from Bereshit.
No.
It's a demon that was believed in.
It's a serpent. It's probably Tiamat.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's
Leviathan or Tanim.
The Tanin.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, Tiamat is seen as a Tanin, a giant one, right? But it would we would consider it probably like an eel, something like that, and they probably existed in the Mediterranean, big.
There were myths of sea serpents, like
Yeah, it's a sea serpent, exactly.
the Loch Ness monster in Scotland. Or something.
Yeah, something like that. But it's a Nachash. In other words, I don't know if he has any legs, But the point is, Tiamat, who's the goddess of the pagan goddess of the deep, is often seen as a giant snake, and she is the one who when ships sink in the middle of the Mediterranean, that's because Tiamat got them. I mean, in pagan law, right?
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, but it's so strange though that God has to have the Nahash get them if it's in the water. Well, he was a Jewish guy. When he went to the beach, he laid down, and rested and read the paper. Go in the water? Hell no, I don't go in the water. I go just to lie down on the beach and get warm. All right. Isn't this fun?
Yeah.
Tybal.
Oh, I didn't quite hear you. I will word this delicately for the recording.
There you go.
A female deity in the shape, in a morphology that's far more associated and typical of a male. Do you have any comments about that?
No, I mean
Yes, sir.
No, that's how the concept developed. Why would Tiamat be a woman? Well, because in fact, the fact is she is from the get-go. If you read Babylonian or Akkadian language, depictions of the world of these gods, she is powerful. I mean, she can kill Baal. I mean, she's at that top level of power, and it is a she. There's no question about it.
But it's a phallic she.
No, I know, but the fact is, for whatever reason, the gender, it may have been a kind of a counterbalance between Baal, it's interesting. Baal is the god of the heavens, and Tiamat is the goddess of the seas. Okay, and you think of a mermaid, right? The closest we can think of in the mythology that we're familiar with is a mermaid. Well, this is a big, nasty mermaid who really is more snakish than womanish. All right, so that's just their mythology. I'll tell you, when I die, I'll ask the Kadosh Baruch Hu to give me a ticket, and I want to go to get a ticket to Canaan, and I will go and find out. I will come back and explain to everybody exactly why they chose a Nachash.
The only ticket we don't need is one for Tohu Vavohu. That we already have.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, no, that's right. She's responsible part of the Tohu. She's part of the Tohu Vavohu. And the fact is that the word Tehom, which means the deep, there are Bible scholars who say it's associated with Tiamat. You can hear the sounds, right? Tehom, Tiamat with the Taf and the Mem. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it.
So that's it. So Tybal, I don't think that I don't know. I can't explain. In some respects, paganism is much more gender free. In other words, I mean, they play women's roles. There's no question. But some of those women goddesses are absolutely and totally. Do you know who Anat is? That name, Anat, Ayin Nun Taf.
Well, Anat. You mean in Babylonian?
Is it the warfare one?
The what?
The one who wages war.
Yes, Anat is the Canaanite goddess of war.
Wow.
Okay, in Greek mythology, it's Ares, right? And he's a he. So here.
In Greek mythology, I believe, is Minerva is the goddess of both wisdom and war, isn't it?
I don't know.
No, isn't Diana the hunt and war?
That's the huntress.
Yeah, but then I think
Diana is the huntress,
But I
that,
thought Minerva.
and that's in Roman mythology anyway, not in Greek.
And Rabbi, I'm sure you know the Israeli musical group Hadad Nahash.
No.
Oh, because whenever somebody says Nahash now, that's who I think of.
Okay.
Because I'd say modern, but they're probably, I don't know, 15, 20 years old.
Well, but the Nachash in Gan Eden appears to be a male because he speaks in the male form,
Aren't women sometimes, when you say the goddess of the sea, women are sometimes associated with water?
Yeah, well, Miriam.
Yeah, as an example, yeah.
Yes, definitely. Miriam is associated with water, sure.
Gabriella, I just looked fast, and if we can believe AI and Google, Athena is the goddess of war, not Minerva.
That's right. Athena.
Well, Athena is the Roman goddess of war, and I believe in Minerva.
Athena is Greek, isn't she? Athens is named.
According to AI.
Yeah, Athena, it could be, well, then Minerva is, but there's two of them, Minerva.
All right, anyway. All right, so everybody, next week you'll tell us.
Yeah.
We won't have it.
Yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
Leon, the Zoom link for Leon will not be working next week.
Right.
Yeah, don't try it.
All right. Anyway,
let's
go on. So, okay. All right. So the Nachash is doing her job, or whatever. Okay. Now going on. Be'im yelchu vashvi lifnei oivehem misham atzaveh et hacherev haragatam v'samti einai. I think it's blurry. Is it einai?
No, einai.
Eini. Okay.
Eini.
My eye. Yeah, my eye, singular. Okay. There's a trope under it in my text. Okay. V'samti eini aleihem l'ra'ah. The lo l'tova, okay? So if they go, it's funny because we used to say Bashevi, right? That when you go into exile, you drive in a Chevy, right? Never mind. Im yelchu bashvi lifnei oivehem. In other words, they're running ahead of their enemy. They're eager to escape God, right? And the enemy who is doing God's will. Now you see, so here is an example, Eli, where the enemy is actually mentioned, right? It's there. Okay, so they're present in this whole vision as well. But God is saying, if they run ahead of their enemy and into exile, I want to get out of here because I'm going to get killed. I'll go there and hide. Again, God will command the sword, and the sword will kill them. So it's some kind of a mystical, mythological sword. But here it's interesting. V'samti eini alehem. My eye will be on them. Normally, when you say, I will keep an eye on somebody, what does it mean?
Suspicious of them and you.
I'm watching you.
No, I'm keeping an eye on you. It means, right, I'm either
good or bad.
I'll say, here's my cat. Would you please keep an eye on it?
Watch them, guard them.
It could be, that's the point, right? So that's what
it could be a lot of things. It could be
exactly. Look what it says, though. Look at the text. L'ra'ah lo l'tova.
Yeah, for the bad,
not for the good. See, so he's keeping his eye out for them. And because of that, that is going to result in bad things. So it's almost like the use of the eye here and evil. I think it's like it's part of the rhetoric, the rhetorical. All right.
It reminded me of the Yiddish.
Oh, Ein Hara, of course, the evil eye. Yeah, that's the antithesis. This right. So, but that I don't know where that came from. Maybe here.
That's what.
Maybe this is because generally when you say I'm going to keep my eye on you, it means I'm going to watch you. Either make sure you do what you're supposed to do, or it can mean, as you said, to protect you, make sure that you're okay. So, but here it's categorically bad. Okay. So now, but now again, this is going to sound familiar. Adonai Elohim. It should be Elohei Hatzvaot. Ha-nogea ba'aretz v'tamog v'avlu hol yoshvei ba Ve'alta chanior kula v'shak'ah chayor Mitzrayim. Does this sound familiar?
He raises the sea and lowers the sea.
No, it's the earth that lowers and goes up and down as the sea. Ve'alta chayor. It's a river.
That's the river of Egypt.
Yes. We thought,
The Nile.
what God is saying is, God touches the earth, right? And the earth shakes, and people start to mourn. Because why? People have died. They are dying, like they say, they're dying here, right? People are dying. And at the same time, it's another perspective on it. The earth is going up and down like the Nile River. Okay? So so God makes an earthquake. In case you forgot, that was in the last chapter, verse 8 of chapter 8. Al zot lo tirgaz haaretz ve'aval kol yoshev ba ve'alta chayor kula chaor, and that's probably a mistake. Chayor kula v'nigresha v'nishka'a chayor Mitzrayim. Almost a few different words, but the same concept. God touches the land, and there's an earthquake, and people die. Right, the whole notion of Avel, right, bereavement, mourning with a U. All right, so this is all what's happening. So basically, what you see happening here is all of these really force elements of nature. God is using all of them, as well as some magic, right? And God's hand. So it's a combination of divine power and divine manipulation of nature to kill these people and to prevent them from going and getting away, right? If they run away to exile, you would have thought God should say, "Abi gesund soll liegen in der Erde," right? Go to exile, die over there, great. Doesn't say that. I'm going to bring him out because I want to kill him. I mean, if this is God at his worst, I mean, he's killing everywhere, controlling everything, utter destruction, okay? And who is this God? Haboneh b'shamayim ma'alato, agudato al aretz yisada, hakorei lemei hayam v'yishbechem al pnei haaretz Adonai shmo. God has built the upper chambers in heaven and the vault on the earth. He established the vault on the earth, presumably part of the structure that keeps the Shamayim up. Remember, what is the Shamayim? Look at my hand. What is the Shamayim?
It's above the horizon.
What is the
Isn't it a boundary or a barrier?
A barrier, a hard, what's the other Hebrew word? Genesis chapter 1. Rakia.
Rakia.
What does the Hebrew root Resh Kuf Ayin mean?
Yeah.
Hammer out something metallic. To hammer out something, it is so a rakia is riku'ah. It has been hammered out. It is hard, right? It's a barrier. Yeah. Remember, what's on top? What's on top of the barrier?
Lots of water.
Water. And what does it do? It separates the upper waters
from the lower waters.
The lower waters. And the lower waters, God separated from the land. So the lower waters sit over there, and the land is here. The upper waters are there. But the lower waters are also an extension of the Tehom, the deep, way down below. And that's why in the flood, the water comes from up there, and that's the rain, and the water bubbles up from down below. And that was the Mabul. All right, that's the flood story. Okay, all right. So the point is, so God is this powerful being who creates this structure so that there's this place up above, and the God doesn't live. His ma'alot, his chambers, are actually, if you will, above the rakia, beyond. Okay, because what's in the rakia? There's something in the rakia that God created also and put in the rakia.
The sun and the moon?
The sun and the moon and the stars, right. And they're on a track, right? And they rotate. And if you listen quietly at night, you can hear it going clickety-clack, 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 like a little train.
Especially if you're high.
What?
especially if you're high.
If you're what?
High.
High?
High, he means
With
like if
drugs.
had too much pot. That's what he means, right?
Oh, high.
Yes.
Oh, high with an A.
Like the rakia.
Yeah, I got
Oh,
Yes. Okay, I got it. Yes, exactly. Right. Or you can have scotch and you can get high too. That's even
Right.
more fun. Yes. Right. Anyway, so this is this God, and he can do whatever he wants, right? And the whole notion here is it's interesting. These vaults that help keep the rakia up. I think I mentioned once before. Part of the concept of the physical world that it was first, I think, developed in ancient Babylonia was the rakia, right? The rakia is what it is, but it sits on the tops of the mountains, right? Because imagine, especially, if you're in a river valley, right? And there's mountains on both sides. So when you look up, what do you see? Here's the rakia, right? And it's got water up there because it's blue, right? That's why it's a blue sky. What's the color of the sea? Blue. So if it's a big bunch of blue, what is it? Water, right? So there's water up there and there's water down here. And that's the rakia. But because God is a great engineer, the rakia doesn't just float. It sits on vaults that keep it sturdy. What are the vaults?
mountains.
Mountain. Because when you look over there at the end of the rakia, what is there? A mountain or a mountain range, right? Clear, right? So that's what they believed. They saw, and based upon what they saw, they created a reality. And then that was, by the way, that concept developed and kept alive down through until the Middle Ages, right? You think about it, right?
Oh.
When did people? It is said here. So the question is, when did people find out actually, or come to really believe that, or know that the Earth actually goes around the sun, right? Because if you look from the Earth's perspective, the Earth is standing still, right? And the sun is moving. So the Earth is in the middle and the sun goes around it, right? Okay. Until comes Galileo and those other guys.
Copernicus.
Right? And they say, no, even visually and mathematically, we can prove that it's the other way around. And you're talking 17th century.
Yeah, but it's also happened 3,500 years ago with the Babylonians.
Yes,
They
and
the Earth was going around the sun.
they what?
They also knew the Earth wasn't around the sun. They even knew the size of the Earth.
Oh, it's possible, but the Babylonians were also the ones who invented the concept that I was telling you about.
One doesn't mean the other.
I know, of course. But the Greeks also had people who were back then already doing the same thing.
Mathematically, it was fairly easly to prove.
Yeah.
Well, didn't they think that the Earth was flat anyway?
Oh, sure. Look, why do you think it was? When Christopher Columbus went sailing, they thought he was going to fall off the end.
Right.
So, okay.
The same thing with the color of the sky, Rabbi.
What?
The color of the sky, blue. I mean, at that time, you see that they interpreted it as water.
Yes.
Today, it's not water.
No, we know. Exactly. And that's why the whole point was, so if there's water up there, and it rains, how does it get down? Well, that's
clouds. I mean, we're talking about the color blue.
No, I understand. But I'm saying even before they realized that the water was held in the clouds.
Right, yes, what held them, yeah.
Babylonian image was that you have trapdoors. And it says so in the flood story, but the Patach,
Shamayim, yeah.
Arubot HaShamayim. Arubot HaShamayim opens up, right? Clear as day. I see it right there, Seeing is believing. Not always. Okay. All right. So anyway, this Ma'alatav is something that people are concerned about. It doesn't make sense. His steps, Shir HaMa'alot.
Right.
Ma'alot are steps. So God makes steps to heaven. Stairway to heaven. Oh, that's what that is. Of course, Bible scholars don't think that's right. What they think is you have ditography. You see, it looks so it's Bashamayim Ma'alotav. And so it ends with an M and somebody, a scribe, maybe had a little dyslexia, and he saw a double, he made it a double M, and there were no spaces necessarily between words. So it was Bashamayim, and then the second Mem, and it should have been Aliotav, but it ended up being Ma'alotav, because that doesn't make sense that you make a stairway to heaven, unless you do. So, but just as, because the whole notion of here it's structures that support things, all right, that are substantive, not just stairs. So the aliotav are chambers, okay, and the agudah actually in this context a vault, right, to hold something up. All right, it comes like agudah agod means to bring things strands together. But it also but the point is that's how you get strength. So the point is this is a strong structure with a shape. So it's a vault. Okay. Anyway, so this is God. All right, and that's the end of the vision. Basically God is pulling all the stops and killing all of these nasty people. Keep that in mind, because this sounds like utter destruction. Utter destruction. Okay. Moving forward, verse 7. This is one of those powerful Amos lines where he really throws a zinger. The first one we saw was Rak etchem yadati mikol mishpachot ha'adama. Verse chapter 3, the beginning of chapter 3. Only you have I known among all the families on earth. Right? So this is going back a way. So if you say something like that, all right. So Amos says to the people, he's talking to the people in Bethel. God said, Rak etchem yadati mikol mishpachot ha'adama. How does that make you feel? You're in the audience.
Am segula.
Am segula, right?
Chosen people.
Chosen people. And what's the next sentence that God is saying? Al kain efkod aleichem et kol chatotechem.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold you responsible for all your sins. Rhetorical argument, right? All right. So now, so Amos has just finished telling the people in Bethel that he had this vision. And in this vision, y'all going to get destroyed. The Lord is going to punish y'all. And what are you thinking? You're in the crowd. What are you trying to think to yourself? Yes, right, exactly. But wait a second. God said that we are his people, and he so often he says, I took you out of Egypt, right? And I made you mine. I gave you my law, etc., right? And so that's what you're thinking. You're trying to reassure yourself.
You were still thinking that way. Naleinu l'shabeach.
Yeah, exactly. So what does Amos say? Halo kivnei kushim atem li b'nei Yisrael, Ne'um Adonai. You are just like the Cushites, says God. Cushites. That's African tribes who lived in what today would be northern, not Uganda.
Ethiopia?
So no, probably not. Sudan. Northern Sudan. Well, it's in that area right there. And Ethiopia was near there. Sudan, okay. Southern part of Egypt, okay. The Upper Nile, the beginning of the Upper Nile area, okay. Anyway, so
he was the first son of Ham, wasn't he?
Oh, Sam. Oh, yeah. Right. Yes. Yeah. Yes. I think that's right. Yeah. And so so you are no different in my eyes than these weird people who live all the way over there in Africa. You think you're special? Now listen to this. Halo et Yisrael ha'eleti mi'eretz Mitzrayim. Indeed, I took Israel out of the land of Egypt. U'Philistim mikaftor ve'aram mikir. And I took the Philistines out of Kaftor and Aram from Kir. Big whoopee. I took you out of Egypt. I take other peoples out of Egypt. Pagans, okay? What's Kaftor? We don't know. It's some place where the Philistines, the Philistines spread out over all the Mediterranean. I think we talked about it last time. Yeah, Tarshish, right? I'm sorry. That's not Philistine. Sorry. That's the the guys in Lebanon, Tzor. It'll come to me. All right, no, this is the Philistines, right? So they apparently were exiled to a place called Kaftor, somewhere in the Mediterranean, and he brought them back. And Aram went to this place Kir, and he brought them back. Okay, so he's just flipping the fact is the most powerful, frequently referred to concept in the Bible of the relationship between God and Israel is the Exodus, not the giving of Torah. It's the Exodus. All the holidays, right? Exodus, over and over and over again, right? Anochi Adonai Elohecha asher hotzeiticha me'eretz Mitzrayim mebeit avadim. Lo yeh lecha Elohim acherim al pan. First commandment by our tradition. There is a God, and he took us out of Egypt. There you go. And what is Amos saying? Big deal. Don't get a big head. You're not so special, right? And that's his approach completely. Okay? So that's a real punch in the belly. A real punch in the okay. And Plishtim and Aram, that's pouring vinegar into the wounds, because what do they have in common, Plishtim and Aram, vis-a-vis the northern kingdom? They were arch enemies. Aram, the Aramean kings, caused a lot of trouble in the 9th century in the north, okay? And the Philistines, granted, by the time of David, they had been pretty much pushed back. But when they had opportunities, they wouldn't hesitate to come out and try to raid people and to, make life difficult. And these are right next to you, right? Aram is northeast, and Philistines are, if you're in Israel, you're southwest, south on the coast, right? Phoenicians, that's what I was thinking of, and Tyre and Tarshish and that stuff.
Right. But the Philistines seems to have coming from Crete, actually.
They came, well, we don't know, somewhere in the northern central part of the Mediterranean. Some say Greece, islands off of Greece.
There were some kind of they seem to be related to the, in the Peloponnesian, there were 2 wars, Athens, Sparta. They seem to be organized like Spartans.
Oh, it's possible. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but they,
all the women were, there was children in common. Everybody was a warrior. That was an organization like Sparta.
Yeah. Well, but again, but I think it may have been like Sparta, but it is in the area in the Mediterranean side of Greece, yes. Not in Greece proper. People talk about them coming from the islands.
Yeah.
South of Greece.
They were part of the sea people.
Yes, exactly.
Leon, but they were still before the Greeks. The Philistines are a much older nation.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
but the Greeks are much older than the Greeks.
That's what I'm saying. The Philistines.
After all, the famous poet, what is the biggest poet in Greece? He is a contemporary of David.
Yes.
So they lived a long time before 400.
Yeah, right. Well, 900.
David is about 1000 BC.
Huh?
David is about 1000 BC.
Right, and your person you're talking about.
I'm talking about the blind poet. What's his name?
Yeah.
Homer? Do you mean Homer?
Homer.
Right. Yeah.
Homer.
But he was a Chad b'mino. I mean, you didn't have a whole culture that we know of at that time. I mean,
no, he was clearly a Greek poet.
Yes, of course, absolutely.
So there was a Greek society at the time.
Right. But the Plishtim's heyday was over at David. The Plishtim began around 1150.
Correct.
That's when they moved down into Palestine and began to cause trouble.
But if you remember the stories of Homer, that's when the Iliad and the Odyssey happened.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So, it's kind of interesting to compare the 2 places because they're close together and they seem to have overlapping items, especially the Phoenicians.
Well, there was trade, probably. There was trade.
Yeah.
People traded at that time.
So this is his really a real sucker punch.
Yeah.
And then goes on. Then again, uses that same metaphor. Hine Einei Adonai Elohim b'mamlacha hachata'ah. God's eyes are on the sinful kingdom, Okay? And it's both eyes, and it's not for good. V'hishmarati ota me'al pnei ha'adamah, and I will destroy it from the face of the earth. So he's going to destroy that kingdom. But efes ki lo ashmid et Beit Yaakov. But I'm not going to totally destroy the household of Jacob. So there's a differentiation. The kingdom, right, as a political entity, and presumably the people who strongly identify with that political entity will be destroyed from the face of the earth. But the house of Jacob, in the broadest sense, will not be disturbed. It's a 180-degree turn. If you have the sinful kingdom over here, and you got Beit Yaakov over here. And it's interesting that here he's using that term because he's not using the name Israel, because who is it likely? Whom does he have in mind when he's saying Beit Yaakov? But he's not calling it Beit Yisrael. He will below in a second.
That maybe the southern kingdom?
Yes.
Because that's the man, not the tribe. You know, yes. The distinction, right?
Right, and Judah was the son of Jacob, right? So Beit Yaakov is a more neutral term for the people in this statement than is Israel. Okay, so there you can see here's a glimmer of hope that's slowly emerging now after this horrid, lurid discussion of total destruction. Okay, so now then, he's moving on. Ki hinei anochi metzaveh v'hanioti b'chol hagoyim et Beit Yisrael ka'asher yanoah bechavra v'lo yipol tzror aret. Okay, I am going to command and shake in all of the nations they are found, Beit Yisrael ka'asher yanoah bechavra, as one shakes in a sieve. V'lo yipol tzror aret, and the pebbles will not fall to the ground. Okay, so who is it that is going to be destroyed, be shaken out? The sand, right? And who is the sand? Beit Yisrael, specifically the northern kingdom. But the tzror, the few pebbles, will be left behind. Who's that? Judah, Yehuda, and the few righteous who may survive from the north. Yes.
I got it backwards.
Huh?
I thought that what he was saying was, I will permit those that pass the sieve to live, and those that get stuck, the stones.
We're saying that the few people will get killed, and most of the people will die, will live. No, the people. When you think here, I'm imagining, for example, when I wash fruit. Okay, so I have a few berries over here, and there's a lot of water in it, and I'm shaking it to get out the water, and the whole purpose of the sieve is that what's left, that's the good thing. The bad stuff drains out, and the good stuff is left. That's what you use a sieve for.
Yeah, but when you use a sieve, for example, on a flour, but you're trying to leave...
but this is not... you're right. Yes.
So that was what was in my mind.
Right, but here it's not. It's a pebble, you see. And the sand... You shake out the sand and not the pebble. It's the same thing, yeah. But when you shake wheat, right? You want to keep the grain.
Correct.
Everything else go away.
And not the chaff.
Yeah. So I think that's what he's talking about. All right. Okay. Now he's going on, and again he's making a definition, a distinction here. Verse 10: B'cherev yamutu kol chata'ei ami. Right? Ha'omrim lo tagish v'tagdem ba'adenu hara'ah. So he is going to, again, this sword, right? By now we can probably talk about armies, right? Because this is not the vision. This is an oracle. So these people will die by the sword. Who? The sinful among my people. It's interesting. Chata'ei ami. These are the sinners in my people. He's not denying that. And these are the ones who say that lotagish, right? The evil will never catch up with us, and the takdem ba'adenu hara, and overtake us or come near us, right? The people who say no, the bad stuff can't happen to us, right? Those are the people that we've heard this before. We're powerful. We're above it all. And God's saying, no, you're not. Okay. So these are the sinful ones who are mentioned in the vision. Remember all those people who get schmeiced and try to escape? Now in the prophecy, God, Amos is extending that here to this is going to be the reality, not just the vision.
This is fairly early for personal, what do you call it? That only the people who do the evil will die.
Yeah, I mean, there's the making the distinction, right? I mean, but earlier on, he wasn't making that distinction.
Exactly.
Yeah. Apparently, this is more of a. I can't explain it. Has he undergone a more thoughtful process now? Trying to make it clear. This isn't perhaps a foundation for what's coming next, as you're now going to see, which is suddenly a major shift. And some people think that he didn't write this. I happen to believe that what we're going to read in these two psukim, he did, because he's writing it from the perspective of a Judahite. And look what it says. Bayom ahu akim et sukat David hanofalet v'gadarti et pirtzehen v'harisotav akim uv'nitiha kimei olam. In that day, when all this destruction of the evil will happen, I will reestablish, I'll set up the fallen sukkah of David, and I will mend its breaches and set up its ruins as they make them as they were in the days of old. All right? Remember now, Beit David, that's the south, right? He's a southerner. So what he's saying, the David's sukkah has fallen, right? And it did, because more often than not, Judah was either totally under the control of Israel or mildly so. I mean, it turns out during the period of Jeroboam II, Yerabam Hasheni, Israel was subjected a secondary kingdom, but there was a relatively good relationship. But the point was, the kings from the Davidic line were not the ones who were really calling the shots. The big, powerful guy was Yeravam, okay? He was the powerful king. He was the mover and shaker, not the Judahite gods. And he ruled for 40-some years. Powerful guy, okay? So he's now saying, when all this happens, the David king, what he's saying here, will be restored. This is not messianic in the sense it's not the end of days, right? But this kingdom will be it makes sense because it's there, right? In his vision, the destruction is not going to destroy Judah. All that God's wrath is going to be laid out against the north, and in particular the sinful one. And the fact is, it's very interesting. I mean, this is a kind of a logical conclusion to the vision that he had and to his interpretation of it in his prophecy. Very logical conclusion. And indeed, that is what happened, right? Because when the northern kingdom fell, remember, a lot of the folks from the southern part of the northern kingdom fled into Judah and blended into the population there. But they were all living under the domination of a Judahite king. And, it's really interesting, of course, because, and we'll get to this in a second. Who was the king? I mean, if the northern kingdom fell in 721 BCE, okay? About, 700, and that was 721, maybe it's in the 690s. I'm trying to just figure something in my head here. Around 700, a guy called Manasseh took over the kingdom of Judah in Jerusalem, and he ruled for 55 years, once simultaneously at the same time as Hizkiyahu. His father was the great Hizkiyahu, right? The first guy to try to close down the Bamot, Hizkiyahu, a real monotheist. Isaiah was his prophet, Shayahu, Harishon. So during the last 10 years, excuse me, of Hizkiyahu's life, his son, Menashe, ruled with him. And then after he died, he ruled on his own for another 40-some years. So he was either part of or the king for over 50 years. But what's the problem with Menashe? Anybody remember? What was the problem with King Menashe?
Wasn't he an idolater and his spouse was not a great queen?
Well, his spouse was an Israelite. The others, no, you're thinking of Atalia and Izebel were the bad queens. His wife was there, but she was not a dominant factor like those women. But yes, this is the guy who allowed idolatry to run rampant in Judah, all over the place. He often used that as a means of making a political connection to the pagans around to strengthen his power. Like the period of Yerovam, it was a period of relative stability, okay? But this is the guy, according to the Book of Kings, who took young children, who took babies and sacrificed them in a pagan cult in the valley of Hinnom, Ben Hinnom, Gay Ben Hinnom. And that's what the English term Gehenna, right, is what some people use as an equivalent of hell, right? Gay Hinnom, that's what this is about. It was part of Jerusalem, it was a valley off of the Temple Mount, down below. And he lied, child sacrifice. Right. So from the perspective, from a political and economic perspective, he was terrific. From a spiritual, religious one, he was a disaster. His grandson was Josiah, the big reformer, who was killed in battle in 609, prematurely. Okay. But he did the most to get rid of these things. That's the guy. Remember, we talked about this last week, I think. He was the one who totally destroyed Beit El. Apparently it had been rebuilt. And it was in use when he became king. Okay? Because remember, that's right near the northern boundary of Judah. And there was like an area there that the Assyrians didn't care about, where a lot of remnants of the northern kingdom continued to live. And Beit El was rebuilt. Okay? So this is what's, it's ironic. Amos could not have predicted that. Because he's predicting here that the Davidic kingdom will reassert itself. Right, and be made strong, okay, to the point where, verse 12, he's got a political thing here. Laman Yershu et she'erit Edom v'chol hagoyim asher nikra shmi alehem ne'um Adonai osezo, so that they will then take over the remnants of Edom and all the nations with which my name is associated. I, God, will do that. Okay, so what we're talking about? Probably Edom, Moab, Ammon, okay? All those, that the traditions associated, right? Because Ammon and Moab are Lot, right? Edom is Esav, right? And so these are these nations where when Israel passed through there, they were not supposed to destroy them. Sichon melech ha'Emori and Og melech Bashan, yes. But these guys know, because they are cousins, so to speak. But they will control that. So this is all South Orient, right? From this perspective, the Davidic kingdom the kingdom of Yerovam in the north is gone. That was his vision. They're gone, and everything's now going to be focused on the south. Okay? And that's that first statement. Now, there's a second one, however. There is a second thing that a lot of people consider also. So there are a lot of people who say that this turn of this political turn here, Amos didn't do it. And my response is, yes, he did, because he is clearly aware of politics. He's aware of the relationships among kingdoms and the power of God with respect to other kingdoms. How does the book of Amos begin? Al shlosha pisei so-and-so ba'arba lo ashivet, right? I'm going to punish. God punishes all of these pagan kingdoms, right, who are north and west and around Israel. All these guys because they're sinful kingdom. And then, of course, he says, I'm going to give a punishment to Judah. It's not a kind of ultimate thing, right? But he includes Judah in it because there were some folks down there that were not doing good things. But of course, ultimately, he's focusing on Israel. But this is a guy who began the book dealing with politics and nations. And so he's ending on that theme. And I think this is where we have reached the end of his prophecy. But we still have 3 verses to go, which I'll move through. And this is, again, it's a positive note, but it's a little bit different. Okay. Hine yamim ba'im yom Adonai, ne'um Adonai, v'nigash, and the series says, yamim ba'im, days are coming. He used the term yom. I don't recall him using yamim. Yom hahu, right? It's a day. But here it's now yamim ba'im. V'nigash choresh b'katzir, b'kotzer, v'dorech hanavim, b'moshe chazara, v'hativu ha'harei masis, v'chol ha'gabaot titmogagna. Okay? Days are coming, a time is coming, when the plower will meet the reaper, and the treader of grapes, the one who holds the bag of seed, the mountains will drip wine, and the hills shall wave with grain. In other words, a huge crop of productivity will happen, okay? And it's interesting, the prophet Yoel in chapter 4 has this vehetifu hehari masis as well. Maybe he saw Amos and used it, we don't know. Yoel lived later. Yoel lived in the 7th century. His time when he lived is, by the way, very subject to discussion. We're not sure when he lived. He may have been early, late. Anyway, but there's a lot of indications he was later. But now this critical line. V'shavti et shvut ami Yisrael. All right. But I will restore my people Israel. Ubano arim neshamot, and they shall build up destroyed cities. V'yashavu v'nat'u charamim. No, v'yashavu, and they will dwell in the cities, and they will plant vineyards. V'shatu et yanam, and they will drink their wine. Okay? So when he says, I'm going to bring back now shvut is an interesting word. It's interesting. The lexicon does not give a concrete meaning to it. It's a long discussion of the word without actually pinpointing what it means. Because some people say it means exiles. The general assumption, and this is also what's mentioned in the concordance, it means like the good fortune. The good fortune will be restored. It could mean a restored population. It could mean wealth, stability. It will be restored. Lashuv, in the sense, a return of an ideal type of living. But why would Amos, after all he said, and what he just said about the rule of Judah, suddenly start talking about the restoration of Israel, that sinful country whom he cursed up and down? You understand my point? I don't think he wrote that. I don't think he wrote it. I think it was an add-on by somebody much later. So the poison of Israel had dissipated. It says, Ami Yisrael, okay? And that's not Bnei Yaakov. It's Israel, my people, okay? And this is, and Amos made a clear distinction between Israel and Yehudah. Here, it's all mushed together. We don't know who Israel is. But it sounds like he's talking about the destroyed northern cities. But we've seen that the destruction of the north in God's hands was impossible. This would have been impossible. So I don't think he wrote that. I don't think he wrote that. And it's interesting, by the word Shavut, I did research on it. The word Shavut was...
Somebody talking in the background. I don't know what that is. Somebody should use themselves.
Okay. Who's talking?
It's Leon's. I can tell by the green. So if Leon would just mute himself.
No, I wasn't. It's my wife phoning in the other room. Sorry.
In the other room.
I closed the door. That'll help.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anyway, so the term Shavut, it appears 26 times in the Bible. And it's all generally, with one exception, Job, where it's a restoration of private well-being. It's and it's the part of Job that most scholars say is an add-on. The end of chapter 42.
Well, Shevi in Hebrew is galut.
Is what?
Shevi, is galut.
Yeah. Well, Shavut can mean that, but that's much more, and it means that in certain instances. But it also means, as I say, the good fortune, the well-being of something. It's a restoration,
Right.
not just population. It's got a broader meaning. It includes that. Yes, clearly, there's no question. But it's used more particularly now for being, diaspora, the galut. Yeah. But listen, this is the interesting thing. Of the 26 references to it, 21 of them are sources who lived after the destruction of Judah. It's a word that really has developed during the later part of the time of the kingdom. And I don't think it was. Some scholars say, I mean, even Shalom Paul holds that this is something that what I'm reading to you now is something that Amos did right. I disagree with him, my former teacher. May he rest in peace. Because I think he's trying to make it into a uniformity, to find uniformity where it doesn't belong. But most of them is Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Echa, which one of the prophets? Hold on, I have it right here. Give me a moment. It's found in Hosea, which is about a generation after Amos, and he's prophesying against the north. But he also did not see the destruction of the north. He died before that happened. And his book, everybody says, has been worked over a lot, not just in that word. So I don't think he invented it. I think it was plugged into him as well. But right, Zephaniah, that's the guy. Zephaniah uses it, and he's second half of the 7th century. Jeremiah, late 7th, beginning of 6th. Yechezkel, first third of the 6th. And Yoel, late 6th or later. So these guys use it. And my point is, it is by and large, it is after, at least, the earliest would be Zephaniah having witnessed and being aware of the destruction of the north. And they're being in exile, because as we know, the Assyrians were big on exiles. And so when he says that, he's got something to talk about. Amos never experienced that. Hosea never experienced this huge exile. Okay, and then the other guys are all after the destruction of the first temple. So I think the word Shvut evolved a little bit after Amos and Hosea. Okay, all right.
Rabbi, you can also say that the style of this paragraph is completely different from the rest of Amos.
Yes, well, I agree with that. I agree.
I mean, Amos is full of, he's mad, completely mad.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. This guy is not.
Yeah, and suddenly he's too soft here.
Yeah, and it concludes, Unatatim al admatam v'lo yinachu od me al admatam asher natati Elohim amar Adonai. Okay, but Amos would have said Ne'um Adonai.
Right.
Okay.
True. Yeah.
The book of Amos does not end with Amos.
Yeah.
It ends with pseudo Amos, but that last part of Judah got to be him, because it's so right up his alley and so consistent with everything else in the book. All right, Tybal.
Two different things. I just want to make sure which verses you think are not Amos. Do you think it starts with 11?
13 to 15. The last.
Oh, you think 11 is still Amos?
Yeah, that's when he's talking about the Davidic kingdom, and it makes because when the
But it just seems softer to me, right? Because I associate Sukkot with Sukkot Shlomecha. Anyway, all right. But 13 to 15, you think okay? Then the other question is, because this is my primary association with the word Shuo, which is in the Ketubah, where the rabbis say a husband is obligated to redeem a wife from captivity. So does that redemption using that word, where does that come from in the Hebrew Bible, that the rabbis took it and made it one of the obligations?
Elements here, if you look where it's used, they're talking about people, the Shvut, and it's talking about the Galut, people who come back. Shvut includes restoration of. I was telling this to Ellie. Shvut includes restoration of population. But it's
Right.
it's a broader concept. So yes, the rabbis pick up on that note. And because especially many of those prophecies by Jeremiah and Ezekiel, okay, they're talking about the return of people, right? As well as the glory of. And the whole concept of the restoration of populations, prophets, definitely tilts the scale, I would say, toward the use of it with respect to exile. Not totally, but it definitely, there's an emphasis on the human element, not just the restoration of a society. All right. But again, if you look, I'll just give me a second. I'm just going to grab okay. So here's the Concord, right? Done in Eretz Israel by computer, a family of very, very true Jews. And here's Shvut. And what is it? Shiva lamatzav hakodem. Shiva le'etano. Right? Return the previous edition or return to its strength. No reference to Galut, but it's used in the context of Galut, because that is a sign of the restoration. And this is not modern critical thinker. These are traditional. So that means, and the fact that KB spends all that time without really coming down hard, it means this. It's a squishy word because it means a bunch of, and that's okay. Even the definition of the concordance, very, very broad, right? Very broad conception. Okay. So that's what. So then when the rabbis put it into Tuba, they're working. They're picking up that element of it. It's much more human, sure. And the notion of pidyon shvuyim, right? Shvuyim,
Right.
captain.
Yeah, that now obviously, as opposed to, at least for me, ksuba before. Now, since the pogrom, there's a totally different immediate association.
Pidyon shvuyim goes back centuries.
Oh no, I know, but if somebody said that before, I'd immediately think what's in the ksuba first.
Yeah, but the point was that it's part of rabbinic culture. Century. Yeah, Leon.
One of the things that you've taught me this year is that I got to review my history. Give me a good book on Jewish history that covers that portion of history we've been covering, which is the kingdom of Israel from David on.
Right now, I have not. I've been looking for it.
Oh, you do.
The classic ones that I have, especially when you get back to time, are so old that a lot of the information has been sort of tossed aside because recent discovery illuminated.
That's one of the reasons I'm asking, because my books are 50 years old. That was the last time I studied it.
Too. I mean, I have Salo Baron.
Exactly.
Plus, amazing, amazing book.
Mm-hmm.
But today, I mean, I'll give you one. I'm sorry, we're running a little bit late. Can I just, one little thing?
And don't worry about it, Rabbi. We're okay.
The answer, to your question. So I'm preparing a lecture, whatever I was, medieval Europe. So I have my Baron, and I'm reading about the number of Jews in France, 12th, 13th. His sources tell us, these are sources that precede him, that there were 100 towns. I have another book of studies, a compilation from a group, and it's a wonderful series. And anyhow, this was written in the 80s. This one French scholar had done research, a team, and they decided not just to look into archival material from the Jews, but to look into archival material from the Gentile government, discovered that the number and these different areas all over the 100 turned into 1,000.
Location?
1,000 towns and villages in France, Middle Ages, where there were Jews. I mean, everybody said everything was relatively small, but now it was relatively small, 1,000, rather than a relatively small. That's a big difference, but that's the difference.
Which years are we talking about?
What?
Are we talking about the 11th century?
12th, 13th.
12th, 13th.
I remember 14th already. You're in the beginning expulsion. In the 14th century, expulsion, bring them back, because there were
the Crusades.
The reason why they did that was because the Jews charged lower rates than the banker came in and took over. And they were more pliable because of their dependence than these big bankers. Big bankers had, they were that had their roots in southern France and Italy. So if the king started making noise about, hey, what are you doing here? You're charging me too much interest. The king would say, okay, fine, I'll go and take all my millions and millions of loans, and you're going to hold you responsible, and we're going to call those guys, and they're going to come get it from you. Okay. Jews couldn't do that, so they had to charge lower rates. But then the Jews were there, and the Franciscans and all those guys had riled up the people. That's the time of the blood libels and the host desecration and all that junk and poisoning the well.
The Crusades.
That's my answer.
Sure, that's a little earlier than that.
That's right. That's what I'm saying.
Anyhow, so Leon, I'm going to disappoint you.
Yeah.
One of the things, here's what I recommend. Seriously, go to Wikipedia.
Go to where?
Pick a country. Look at the article, because they do. I use it, but I check the sources because they annotate, and I can tell whether or not these are recent, responsible sources that the author of the article, who is anonymous, is using. And if I see sources that are 5, 10, 15 years old, and I see it's balanced, I'll say, okay, this is a good article. but let
me understand. The sources, really, the original sources are Melachim and, Shmuel, Melachim. So if people write books about this period, what other sources can they use?
Oh, no, they're using archaeology. They're using references to other kings who had relations with them. Okay, it's not rich, to be sure.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
No, of course not. And there is, when you see things, I see your hand, Tom. When you see things that are outrageous or mythological in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
So Elijah going up to heaven, that or Elijah's vision in Mount Sinai. He has, of course, those are their imagined theological, spiritual interpretation. That's what's did. But if you can find pattern, and what's interesting is, for example, with the Book of Kings, you got the Book of Chronicles, a different take on the same. And if they're sort of saying the same thing, you can say, okay, there must be some validity. But then you go check the archaeologists. So there's been a big debate going for the last 30 years whether or not David and Solomon actually had them, because there's archaeologists who believe that it wasn't until about 2 generations after Solomon that you actually have a monarchy based upon their interpretation of the archaeology. Okay, but there are a lot of archaeologists agree with them and say they're being and ignoring of this and that, and the fact is one can make a sense. So here they found a fort, which I've already taken 2 groups, 3 different visits. It's called the Ella Valley Fortress. Okay. And the Ella Valley Fortress is built and has been validated by not just carbon dating, but by looking at the pottery that was used. They're using all kinds of new techniques of using microscopes and chemicals and all kinds to learn to pinpoint. And what they found there is that place, that fortress, held 500 people. Not a small. It was built on a hill overlooking Emek HaElah, and that was down the road about 40 miles, was a city of the Philistines, okay? And it was built to keep them in check. And it was destroyed about 100 years after it was built, probably when the Egyptians came in, destroyed. The Egyptians were in there doing some bad stuff in the 900 Solomon. And by then, I think that's when they basically closed down that. But up until that time, from about 1,000 or a number of decades, that was a fort. And the size of the boulder walls, they figured each one they weigh 20 tons. You're going to have a lot of people to be able to build these. And a tribal chief is not the kind of guy who's going to get a lot of people. A king can muster together a lot of people. Okay. And so, and they know the walls are Israelite. So they found some Hebrew stuff. It's an Israelite fortress built in 1,000. And many are archaeologists. There's enough evidence. They don't know if it's Saul or David.
Okay.
Bill Finkelstein still says no.
Okay.
Those things.
Well, anyway, yeah, interesting.
Very interesting.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Have a nice
good
summer.
Yeah.
Have a nice summer.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Everybody, yeah.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
This guy almost.
Yasher Koach, Rabbi Rembaum. We really enjoyed the class.
I enjoyed. So
wonderful.
We did too.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.